Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome back, Thanasi.
Mariska Hagaday.
And this week, I guess we should also say welcome back to the viewers. Obviously, we've had to take a little bit of a break in the meantime. Nothing to worry about. We are back and we are ready to talk eagerly about the wrestling, starting with this week's episode, where we are going to be reviewing the events from WWE's Clash at the Castle event, which saw the screw job of Drew McIntyre courtesy of one CM Punk. We also discuss the events from this week's action-packed Raw, including Seth Rollins' return, Drew McIntyre's quitting, Otis leaving Chad Gable, and most significantly of all, the debut of the Wyatt Sicks. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump ahead to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, Thanasi, let's dive straight into Clash at the Castle. And I want to just quickly grab your thoughts on what you felt about this pay-per-view that just passed.
Oh God, where to begin? Look, I think as an overall, I don't have a lot of like super positive comments aside from the crowd, right? The in-ring wrestling did have some issues. So I think we saw the botches from Jade Cargill. We saw in the main event there was a botch as well, and one of the reported causes for these botches is not jet lag, is not travel. It seems to be that the top rope was significantly looser than was supposed to be, as evidenced by a couple of shots of the referee informing AJ Styles in the opening contest that there were some issues with the rope. So that may have been part of the cause of it. As far as some other like aggregate comments, can you believe that it was the largest arena gate for 11,000 people, Dimitri, which means that the exchange rate between the Great British Pound and the American US dollar must be unbelievable in order for them to pull that off. That was shocking for me.
I tell you what, I thought it was shocking until I remembered they recently broke it in France. And what that said to me is WWE is in high demand right now. And what always happens when things are in demand? Prices go up. So I wouldn't be surprised if WWE has actually put the prices very high for these tickets on the international shows, fully well knowing people will buy. So I think that probably had a part to do with it as well.
Look, there's a whole range of factors when it comes to having a large gate, right? One is attendance, right? And so that's why we're controlling for like arena versus stadium shows. So attendance is one. And this was pretty low by general standards because like 11,000 people for an arena show is still pretty small. So the only other thing that you can take into account is just like you say, ticket prices and also the exchange rate when you're going to the international shows. Um, what else can we comment on?
Well, I want to
Um,
quickly discuss
yes.
the finish to the opening contest,
Oh,
because I know that we were watching this together, and an I Quit match tends to lean to a feud ending, like a bitter feud ending, which we already had reservations about this necessitating such a match, or at least our belief it didn't. But in any case, the finish with AJ Styles cuffed, let's say, to the top rope and, sort of cowering away from the steel stairs. I don't know. I didn't love it as a finish to an I Quit match. I felt like they needed, if they're going to do that spot, I think they should have made him more vulnerable because we could see that he could still run across the ropes. It's not like he was stuck in a spot. Whereas I think, say if he was cuffed on both ends of the turnbuckle, so he literally couldn't get out of the way, at least that would have made him more vulnerable to an attack such as that. Or maybe even they should have opted, similar to what AEW did with the Christian Cage Copeland I Quit match. They should have just opted for a more violent weapon, something that would actually make the fans go, "Oh, we understand the heel here not wanting to get hit." I don't know. What do you think
Yeah.
about it?
No, I agree with that point because especially with a steel steps strike, that's something that actually occurs as a transitional move in a lot of no DQ matches. So for this to represent like the finish in an I Quit match, it just it really rang quite hollow, to be honest. I genuinely found that to be quite disappointing. However, the majority of the match, aside from that, was quite good. Like it was a very traditional sort of psychology. Um, they did have good like in ring action, backstage action, in crowd action as well. So it did feel like it was well structured. I was actually quite surprised at how in control Cody was for the first, say, maybe 5-10 minutes of the match. Because generally, you would expect the heel to take control in the type of matches like this where they've got access to weapons. But that was the only surprising part that I found in that contest. I do think that there could have been dozens of ways to end the match that were better than the way that they finished this one. That's my 2 cents.
I I can't help but agree with your point there. It was like it was a solid match, and just the finish didn't go exactly. Uh, it didn't hit home. It didn't, at least in my opinion, it didn't land the way it could have. But moving on to a bit of the other onto the other matches, we have new women's tag champs with the Unholy Union. Alba Fire, Isla Dawn managed to sneak it away with the win, which for me, them getting that sort of hometown victory, it read very ominous to me for Drew McIntyre's chances. And to be perfectly honest, I actually didn't anticipate Drew winning at the pay-per-view, but at this point in watching the show, I was convinced RK's not going to win because they gave the nice feel-good moment here. Uh, and we also had another IC championship match between Sami Zayn and Chad Gable, where they were teasing further the breakup of the Alpha Academy. What did you think about this contest, honestly?
Look, as far as the IC contest went, I thought it was another good wrestling showing, and I was able to kind of foresee that this would represent the beginning of Alpha Academy's disintegration, right? I actually thought that we'd see more of this in Saudi Arabia, which means it was only a matter of time before we actually saw it on pay-per-view. But I wonder if this means now that we're gradually going to head towards this Team Gable creation now. Like, we've got to see the disintegration of the Alpha Academy, which means we're going to have to head into the natural evolution, the natural progression next.
Well, we'll get onto that soon, but I want to quickly mention as well my thoughts on some of the other matches. Bailey retained her WWE Women's Championship against Piper Niven, another well, the first, at least on this show, actually, of the Scottish people eating defeat in front of their own fans. But we also had the main event of Damian Priest versus Drew McIntyre. Notably, as you pointed out, there was also a botch in this match with Damian Priest's leg getting caught up in the ropes. Very dangerous, but thankfully, seems like everything. It seems like he's okay. However, apparently he may have been injured. I remember hearing reports that he may have been injured during this match, so we'll see what develops. But I really want to talk about the finish. Now, Drew McIntyre won the right to have the Judgment Day barred from ringside for this match, which I think for all of us eager WWE fans sort of made us think, oh, who else might interfere on Damian Priest's behalf? And it turned out to be CM Punk, who rode all the way on, well, not rode, he went on the airplane all the way to Glasgow just to screw over Drew McIntyre. We have a new contender for the pettiest man alive. And he counted two, put on a referee's shirt, counted two, stopped, and it allowed for a distraction that gave Damien Priest a chance to recuperate from the attack and then eventually beat Drew McIntyre, retaining the World Heavyweight Championship. And I felt that in many ways how the ending to the opening match didn't land with me. I felt that the ending to this match really did. I think it served perfectly for the ongoing storylines for each of these wrestlers, even in a way, serving up the whole attitude of Damian Priest, who's trying desperately to prove he is a champion in his own right, and yet he's holding on to that title for dear life, courtesy of external factors. And then you throw in, of course, the bitter rivalry that's developing between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. How did you feel all about this? And also, how did you feel about CM Punk representing Celtic at the post-match conference that they did, which is probably the closest we are ever going to get to CM Punk representing Panathinaikos?
Look, we'll get to that particular part in a moment, but let me just put things big picture. I was shocked that CM Punk did not incite a riot by having screwed over Drew McIntyre, because I really thought, because you said you weren't surprised by the outcome. I was, for the pure reason that the Scottish fans can get pretty rabid. So I would have thought initially, and I still am quite dumbfounded by it, that it would be a stupid decision for safety reasons to have Damian Priest go over. And if you look at the shot, right, if you look at the replay, CM Punk is even there hugging and celebrating with fans, making physical contact after the finish, which to me, logically, can only mean one thing, and that is that Scottish fans are not Scottish fans first. They are first allegiant to either the Rangers or to Celtic, which means that it was half the arena was behind Drew McIntyre in earnest, and the other half wanted him to lose because he's a Rangers fan. And the proof's in the pudding because, as you pointed out, CM Punk walks into the press conference with Celtic gear on, and I must say, it is it's one of those things that gets to me when I see a crossover between two interests that I have, right? And that often happens, say, when there's like artwork that combines, say, The Simpsons with wrestling, right? Like you might have an Attitude Era themed artwork where they map certain characters to certain wrestlers. You'll recall as well the photo that I sent you a few weeks ago at the A-League Grand Final, where I don't remember which player it was, but he was holding up either a toy or a replica WWE Championship spinner belt after final. And now we have here the crossover of one of the football teams that we follow and one of my favorite wrestlers of all time in CM Punk. So that was honestly a very, very special moment to see that. But yeah, look, frankly, I'm still in shock at the booking decision. I really, really thought that Drew McIntyre was going to go over. Does it make sense in storyline? In many ways, it does, right? Because it just puts so much heat on CM Punk. And in all the months that these two have been going at it, they have not had one wrestling match with each other, not one. And I think this is the best way to create this distinction between the AEW style and the WWE style of presentation, because WWE has created now so much hype for the inevitable contest between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, whereas even though it is a dream match, AEW probably would have just given that to us on TV or in one of the first pay-per-views or something like that.
To come to their aid just for a little bit, obviously with AEW, you're usually more so the defender than I am. But I'll say WWE would have put this match on. I'm certain of it. if Punk were fit. There's no way they would have waited this long to actually do the match. I definitely think that part of the reasoning why, like, we know that the feud's getting so interesting because it's, you know, if you permit me this analogy, it's like two people that like each other, but they haven't told one another how they feel, but they constantly seeing each other week on end, and the anticipation is building to eventual release, which, for two people liking each other, it's say a kiss or an embrace. For wrestling, it's actually getting fists against each other. So I think with them, it's worked out brilliantly for the feud that it almost feels like their first match will also be good enough to culminate the rivalry. And
Oh
how often in
yes.
wrestling can you say that? Where it's like that one match is all you need to actually end it. That's so rare. And I think for them, it's happened by chance. It's just how things have worked out. I am very excited for the match. I have a sneaky suspicion that it might happen at Money in the Bank as well, because Punk was teasing that he's getting very close to being cleared, very close. In fact, he said this latest Friday SmackDown, he might even be able to give the good news. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm very excited about it, and it feels good to see one of these great storylines feel like it's about to come to that huge combustive end. So yeah, so that was really Clash at the Castle. But to be perfectly honest, as much as there is to talk about that, I would argue there's potentially even more to discuss about the post Raw from Clash at the Castle. And it started immediately with a bang, with Seth Rollins returning to Raw. And honestly, I have to say, are you surprised he's back this soon?
I am, and more like the reason I'm surprised is because I was kind of happy for the bloke to for him and Becky Lynch to just have some time, the both of them at home with their child, because for a long time they were like touring together with a baby. And just like from a sentimental point of view, I was like, it's great that they can have some time, like just as a family, away from the touring schedule. Um, and I just really thought that after the after Becky Lynch had to extend her stay on the tour, on the main roster schedule following Rhea Ripley's injury, that maybe that they would get that chance after she, actually did manage to take her break only a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah,
So it hasn't actually even been that long for them, but certainly very surprised, not from a physicality perspective, purely from a work-life balance perspective. I was shocked to see him back so soon.
I was shocked equally for that reason, but at the same time, I was very happy to see him back. And I saw this comment on the YouTube video of his return, which really sat well with me. And it was something along the lines of Raw actually hasn't felt the same without him, and it's good that he's back. And I understood exactly what they mean by that, because something we forget is Raw after WrestleMania, and I don't mean the Raw after Mania, I mean just in general, Raw as a show after WrestleMania lost essentially its two biggest baby faces in Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. Now, to lose one is devastating, to lose two is terrifying. And you could almost feel that losing that amount of star power straight away, it put the burden on guys like Drew McIntyre, Sami Zayn, Damien Priest to step up. And they did a good job. But to get those stars back is always a good thing. And it felt to me like him coming back almost immediately. It's like, oh, yes, we have another main guy that's going to elevate Raw to, the heights as high as it can be. And I was really actually quite pleased that immediately he's been thrust back into the world title scene, which I thought, I don't always love it, but in this case, I thought, oh yeah, give Damian Priest and Seth Rollins that match again 1 year after they battled for the World Heavyweight Championship. They teased Priest cashing in on Rollins so much that it almost feels perfect that now it's like Priest gets a chance to actually prove, can he hang with the original World Heavyweight Champion of this latest iteration. How do you feel about that?
Look, for me, it is just I do have to disagree in principle with the idea of Seth Rollins getting a world title match as like his first match back after a period of absence. I think that's a little bit unnecessary.
We don't know it's his first match though. We just know it's his first
It's his
pay-per-view.
first feud back, basically.
Yeah, but I would say that WWE has the clause, like the rematch principle, right? For most title
That
holders.
was done away with several years ago.
But it's a convention. I'm not saying it's a rule, but I'm saying it's not unprecedented for champions who lose their title to get a chance to win it back at the next possible pay-per-view. And in Rollins' case, this is the next possible pay-per-view.
Yeah, nevertheless, I think that the rematch clause has been done away with, and also even when it was a thing, it wasn't a case of you come back whenever you see fit, and then you get your rematch, right? It was subject to the whims of the authority figure at the time. I will say this though, when it comes to Seth Rollins and being in a world heavyweight championship match again, it's pretty clear that he's going to lose. So he's been brought back essentially to put over Damian Priest. That's going to be a good look for Priest, right? Because Seth Rollins is a very experienced member of the roster, a future Hall of Famer. He's essentially the modern day Shawn Michaels, a workhorse champion in his own right. So this is going to be a big victory for Damian Priest. And even in the few matches that he's had, the reign has been quite successful, I would say, overall. And because we're heading towards SummerSlam where he's going to go against Gunther, and quite likely we're going to be seeing Gunther go over as well, I think he does need a good solid victory at Money in the Bank ahead of that, just to make him really, really strengthen as a champion.
I'm I don't know. I'm on the fence. Not I think either outcome is good, but I also think that what's a better look, Gunter beating Priest or Gunter beating Seth Rollins? Like I have a suspicion that they're going to give it to Seth to have Seth drop it to Gunter because they're going to say who's our biggest possible guy that we can do that with. Because it's also like you want the fans to be cheering for the opponent of Gunter, I think, because he's such a traditional heel for the company. They're going to want to try and give him the best possible chance that you go up against someone that they want to actually beat. So I'm very curious in that, and I'm not saying this is a criticism. I think it's great that for a long, that the World Heavyweight Championship, it actually feels unpredictable. It feels like anything could happen. Like even a week ago, there were a lot of people that thought Drew McIntyre would win, and that didn't seem outlandish. Like that seemed not just possible, but almost like a good choice. So, I think we're in a very good position with the World Heavyweight Championship without it being exceptional. Because there's two good things you can have. One is a fantastic champion, and two is having a great division. Now, if the two happen to coincide, brilliant. But as long as you have one or the other, I think things look good, right? So yes, I'm very excited with this, but I digress. Some other items to address. Drew McIntyre. Now, Drew McIntyre is a bit bitter for us, isn't he? He's a bit upset.
McIntyre wants to give someone a smack, doesn't he?
He he said he quit. Now, I found this a very interesting choice of segment. I don't know where it's leading. Is he going to take a mini absence, or is this a ruse to sort of jump to CM Punk at the next possible Raw? Like, what do you think this means?
Could be that. I guess potentially he could also be like a what do we call it? Like a shock entrant into the Money in the Bank match, and he makes like a surprise return at Money in the Bank to win it out of nowhere.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
like you could have that. Uh, but yeah, look, I mean, essentially this is a rage quit, right? Because
Yes.
of the way he was screwed over in the most literal with the most literal meaning possible. Um, and I mean, I can't blame him because he was he was basically screwed. Like he had Damien Priest beaten. He didn't kick out the 3 count. But I don't know where this is going to lead. I mean, it has to lead to CM Punk at some point. That's what it's all been leading up to. But how long this absence is going to be is yet as yet unclear. I think it's going to be shorter rather than longer, to be honest.
I agree. I think we could even see him back as soon as this Friday, or for us Saturday. Like he could even jump Punk in Chicago to try and return serve for him jumping him in Glasgow. Yeah, like I don't know, but I love what Drew's been doing. I love it. Mm. I also want to briefly discuss the Otis uh Gable situation. Now, I don't know about you. I felt like we got teased with the climax because one of the great things when the big guy finally turns on the leader or the master, one of the great things about it is like that beat down that you give them, the actual like the comeuppance. In his case, all he did was push Gable. Like it feels like we didn't get all of it out of the system, and I don't know. Like, would you have preferred a bit more of like an aggressive conclusion,
Oh, of course.
an aggressive breakup?
Yeah, you want to see Chad Gable get his comeuppance, and you want him to receive that comeuppance from his former enforcer. It's that simple.
Yeah, and it's even like the backstage segment where he basically just said, "I'm done." It's like that's the sort of thing you expect when like it's a surprise exit from a teammate or something. It's like I'm done. What? No. Whereas this, it wasn't. I think there's more to be told here, but I don't know how they're going to go about it because Gable was on screen, not maybe not murdered, but he was very much violently assaulted courtesy of the Wyatt Sicks, which I think is the big talking point we really wanted to get into this week's episode. The Wyatt Sicks debut. It followed the main event where Jey Uso booked his place in the Money in the Bank ladder match. And we've seen now, after all the vignettes, QR codes, teasers, clues, what have you, the appearance of the what was a rumored faction back when Bray Wyatt was still alive, what was going to happen, and now it seems to be carried on by his uncle Howdy. This is, I don't, for me, this was a brilliant debut. I'm also fearful of what it means for the show as a whole. And what I mean by that is it was a fantastic debut where it makes all of them look fantastic. And that I'm including the Sister Abigail, which is being reported Nikki Cross. I'm including the Rambling Rabbit, which is Eric Rowan. I'm including Husky the Pig, or whatever, Huskus the Pig, whatever his name is, which is apparently Joe Gacy. We've got Mercy the Buzzard being represented by what's reported as Dexter Loomis. So we've got the gang. They all looked great. It was a fantastic end to Raw. I was captivated by the whole 5 minute segment, which, by the way, has gotten millions of views already on WWE's channel. But I also think at some point, and I saw a comment on it that exemplified this point. At some point, they need to get in the ring. They need to fight people. They need to what does this mean? I don't know. How did you feel about all this, Thanasi? Because it was a brilliant segment.
Look, on that particular point that you raise, I think it's important for us to just pull that apart because, as you will recall from the Bray Wyatt documentary, I think Triple H was the one talking about it. He said one of the hardest things about working with Bray Wyatt, with Wyndham Rotunda, is that he did have these brilliant story ideas, but they really struggled to be able to channel those ideas into how do we put this into a wrestling match? Because it was very much creative juices flowing, but at the end of the day, it was still in a wrestling promotion. So it needed to culminate in some kind of a wrestling match. So I'm less worried about that continuing to be the case because the people with the creative control here which is, the WWE establishment now, not Bray Wyatt himself, they are very much cognizant of the fact that we need to be culminating in a wrestling match. And all the members of the Wyatt Six as well are like traditional wrestlers as well, right? That's their profession. So I'm quite optimistic about how they're going to go about it. I
What
think
what is their path? Do they go after gold? Do they go after destruction? Like what do you what do you see as the realistic option for them?
I think you treat them in the same way that you would have treated Kane and The Undertaker between, say, the year or basically when in that long spell between The Undertaker having world title reigns. Because I think he won it in 1990 for the first time. Had a couple wins in the late 90s as well, but then had a long gap as well from then. Like I think there was like a 5-year gap between 2002 and 2007 when he had because he returned with the Dead Man character in 2004, but did not have a world championship reign until 2007 at WrestleMania 23. I think that is the sort of reverence that you should be affording to these kind of supernatural, macabre, dark characters, where you don't put them in a feud with a world title contender so that you set them up for losses, right? You put them in matches sparingly, right? You put them in matches sparingly. And when you do put them in matches, you're setting it up so that they can win the feud. I think it should be treated very delicately. But they do need to get into the ring, but they don't need to be in the ring all that often, to be honest, right? As long as one of those 6 is making a regular appearance, and there's 6 of them, so you have a lot of room for rotation, I think you're going to be okay.
Well, the interesting thing for me is everyone's been referring to them as the Wyatt Six. I've saw somewhere, I don't remember if it was an credible source, but they're saying that Wyatt Six can also mean SICKS, as in the Wyatt Six. And that notably we have 5 people right now. Some are speculating the 6th member is Bray Wyatt in spirit. Some people are speculating Alexa Bliss might turn up at some point. In any case, I will say to sum up everything, it's going to be captivating television moving forward, at least for the infancy. I like I've I rarely say to myself, I need to see the next week's episode to see what's going on there. But this feels very much like a storyline where you're going to want to tune in every week to see what is happening next. I don't know how regularly they're even going to appear, but I have to say I'm definitely enthralled by it. And as much as I have concerns about what it can mean in a wrestling sense, there's no denying that when you see a guy like Chad Gable with a wound on his head, it's going to make you wonder what's going on in the company. Which, by the way, I just want to quickly interject. There were many, like, what to me looked like security people laid out by the various members of the Wyatt Six. People are speculating online as to which wrestlers are there, if there are there. Some people are saying they saw Carmelo Hayes, which Carmelo Hayes actually denied. Some people was theorizing Gunther was in there, or maybe Ludwig Kaiser. Like they're trying to throw people in there. I genuinely feel if there was any wrestler actually there, they would have very clearly shown them the way they did with Chad Gable. Because you should actually point out if the wrestlers have been attacked. So I'm very intrigued by this and what's going on. Sounds like you are as well, Thanasu.
Look, what I am very conscious of though is that I think week to week we should be having relatively significant storyline developments here because we know what wrestling fans are like. If we don't have developments week to week, the excitement is going to fizzle, right? And that doesn't reflect anything about the captivating or the captivation of the story itself. It is reflective of the fact that wrestling fans they look for something new week to week. So I hope that when we tune in next week on Raw, that we have more developments on this Wyatt Six storyline, this plot line.
Well, speaking on the virtues of continuing the development within a storyline or something, I wanted to quickly raise the NXT situation that's been going on. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Jordan Grace showed up in NXT. It was a huge shock. Everyone loved it. She lost the match against Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's Championship. Still, though, it had a buzz to it, and people were reporting that this is going to be a crossover that they're going to continue. And we saw it happen this week on NXT in the Battle Royal, which had two members of the TNA men's roster involved, one being the veteran Frankie Kazarian, and the other was one Joe Hendry. Now, Joe Hendry is someone that I've enjoyed, especially even like his exploits on the British indie scene. Not so much for his in-ring work, though it's quite sound, nothing spectacular, I would say, but his character work, his gimmick of, the songs, throwing digs at his fellow wrestlers. I always thought it was something that could fit very well in a WWE environment. And not only has he been given a chance here, it feels like the fans were already quite warmed up to him because he got a huge pop. It was a fantastic little moment. It's a shame that he literally got thrown out of the Battle Royal within like 30 seconds, but I'm liking where this thing is going, and it feels like the NXT thing is an actual reality. It's not just a gimmick that they threw up for that one match between Jordan Grace and Roxanne Perez. How do you feel about all this going on right now?
Look, I mean, it's AEW with New Japan have the Forbidden Door, and it looks as if the I can't remember exactly what it's called, you may recall, but it looks like the door between WWE and TNA is now the portal of prohibition, or the prohibited portal or something like that. Um, so this is like essentially unprecedented, right? Like how long has it been since we've ever had any kind of cross-promotional deal between WWE and the outside world? It's been many, many years. Probably dates back to the 80s, or even earlier with Japan.
I,
So go on.
I was going to say, I remember a day when AJ Styles just mentioning TNA on the Stone Cold podcast was considered groundbreaking.
Indeed.
8 years later, they're collaborating with them. It's
Or
insane.
even you recall when in 2000 and I think it was 2018 when Sami Zayn um and Kevin Owens had been sacked from SmackDown, and they went looking for a job on Raw. And at that point, Kurt Angle was the general manager. And he says, "No, I don't have any vacancies, but I hear TNA is hiring." And that was supposed to be a big whoa moment. Like he mentioned the competitor. Um, I'm curious to see like if this is like a small temporary deal, just like a couple months of like a cross talent agreement, or if we're looking to see more of this kind of stuff later down the track. Um, what I would like to see more of though is, and I'm not sure if it has happened already, but it is to have NXT talent appear on TNA television or on TNA pay-per-view or television tapings. I think that would actually be like the full culmination of this sort of a talent exchange deal where I'll like bring your talent so that I can win over people on my show, but then I'll also give you some of my talent to get you clout on yours.
Yeah, I think slowly but surely we will see that happen because talent have expressed interest in such a thing. So I definitely think it's possible. And I have to say that it feels weird to see WWE collaborating with another company.
I've got a question for you on this topic. Who do you think comes off as the beneficiary, or as the greater beneficiary of this talent exchange deal? Is it NXT or is it TNA?
I'm going to tell you, I genuinely think, as it stands right this very minute, TNA. However, I also think this is a potential ploy from from WWE's part to scout TNA's big stars. Because if they do this collaboration, you say, Jordan Grace, come in, let's see what you've got. She goes, well, you say to her, oh, we really enjoy you. Hey, why don't you consider coming full time? And then TNA ends up losing their biggest stars. So I think it's one of those things where in the short term it really helps them out a lot, but in the long term it could help WWE. And I think that's the way it's been positioned. Like that's the way it's been argued. It's we'll do this because we think it'll help you guys, but we also think it'll help us with getting talent over, which is what remember the days when Triple H was rating Ring of Honor's latest star basically every other week. So like we know that he keeps an eye on the talent from the rest of the wrestling scene. He's not an idiot. He's not just interested in hiring college athletes. Like he does want to keep an eye on the wrestling or the aspiring wrestlers around the world, really. So I
So
think that's how I feel about it.
I would say just even reputationally, right? Think of it this way, that I think TNA does have a big benefit here because let's leave to the side the fact that WWE is the market leader, right? And let's only focus on the NXT portion, which is developmental. I still think that the NXT portion has greater viewership than TNA as a main roster, right? So TNA is winning by getting their talent to receive attention on a bigger platform and also just to hear their own name received on a bigger platform. However, it does work as an inverse way as a benefit to WWE because it says, well, look at us, our developmental is
Is
on
on
par with this other main roster, right? So it just makes them look, makes all of WWE as a corporation look much stronger than TNA as their own company.
yeah. I have that same reservation. It's one of the issues I have with the AEW and JPW relationship is that AEW guys can and have frequently been champions in their company, and it's never really reciprocated. And it makes it look like AEW is far superior. Now, with WWE, we know they're the market leader. We know they're leaps and bounds ahead of TNA. But if you're doing it with their kids, it really does feel like you're kicking a company down. You're kicking them while they're down. So I think there needs to be a healthy balance that they strike. But that's something we say out of respect. Them as market leaders, if they think they're benefiting out of the relationship with WWE, as in TNA is benefiting from it regardless, then WWE is going to say, well, we're of course going to make ourselves look good. So I don't know. I think there should be a thing where, informally the championships don't change hands, but they do have outside company competitors compete, just like what Jordan Grace did with Roxanne Perez. In theory, you could have another of their stars compete against Jordan Grace, say even someone like a Chelsea Green who has expressed interest in going back. Say she goes there just to lose, give them the nice little match. So there's a balance that needs to be struck there, but it feels like TNA's improving and they're on the rise. Like they're feeling the energy coming up again in this year. And I wanted to briefly mention as well the return of one Jeff Hardy to TNA. It was a nice moment. He saved his brother from an attack from a group of villains, which brings me back to a couple years ago when Jeff did the exact same thing in AEW. But he returned, and they have the OG Hardy theme song as well, which is nice. And I think it feels weird because of TNA's current position in the pecking order and because of Jeff Hardy's current status as a wrestler. It almost feels nice to see Hardy in TNA, whereas years ago, it almost felt heartbreaking to see Hardy in TNA instead of in WWE. Do you get my point? Like now it almost feels like it's just good to see them together, to see him out there instead of, just lingering in the background on at home.
Yeah, no, I do understand what you mean. I will just bring back this point that when Jeff Hardy did go to save his brother in AEW, he did not neglect to do a little dance to the loaded theme song when he came out.
He really enjoys it, clearly.
He really enjoys it, and he has access now to that same theme music in TNA. So they've used the same theme song now across three promotions, and that is pretty cool, I must admit. Where I want to go with this, though, aside from those two little facts, is I do think that TNA is probably the best location for the Hardys at the moment because it did feel like they were squandering in AEW. Like there wasn't a lot there for them to do. And WWE just seemed like there was nowhere for them to go, right? Because they achieved everything that they could achieve. There was no room for growth, no room for visibility anyway. So I think being in TNA, hopefully to do something kind of creative, maybe something with the woken, broken, shattered gimmick, potentially bringing that back, potentially bringing back a Willow, something a little bit different, right? To properly freshen it up. Not this like stupid nostalgia act for the 90s and the early 2000s, but maybe a nostalgia act for the late 2010s and early 2020s.
Yeah, modernize the nostalgia a bit.
Indeed.
I wanted to raise this with you. With NXT and TNA having a mutual relationship, what do you think about the idea of the Hardys linking up and battling out with some of the NXT tag teams and stars? Because I think that puts them in a great position where they will bring eyeballs onto the show and they will bring attention to the stars in which they share the ring. And I think that's the thing AEW struggled with sometimes is they didn't always utilize that to the best way they could. Admittedly, a big part of that is because Jeff Hardy did have troubles during his time there and it sort of dented any sort of progress. But I think now that, they've repaired it, that could be a good thing to do, which is have some true veterans, arguably the greatest tag team of all time, actually bring some positive attention to the new generation of tag team wrestlers.
I will say this. Basically, the only thing left for the Hardys to tick off on their decorated list of achievements is the NXT tag titles. So might as well put them on NXT as TNA talent, but put them on NXT and have them take the straps. Why not?
I think that actually isn't an impossibility because if there's anyone from TNA that could win WWE Gold, you do it to the guys that have won it 30,000 times over. Well, I have to say, I'm very excited now with this whole thing. Like, it feels like WWE has got lots of things going on at the same time of importance, of interest. Hell, even Clash of the Castle, Randy Orton started eyeing up Cody Rhodes' championship for a little bit, and it got everyone's hearts racing because it's like, oh, is he gonna go up against Cody? Like, we're getting excited about things that might not even happen yet, things that haven't been properly shown. So I think we're in a very good place with the wrestling landscape as of this very moment. Well, on that note, Thanasi, we'll have to leave the discussions for next week. We'll see what develops in the next week of wrestling. And that brings us to an end for this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be discussing the emerging fallout from Clash of the Castle on SmackDown. We'll be reviewing CM Punk's return segment, which hopefully is a return to the ring, but if not, at least we're guaranteed to get some good words from the guy. And we'll see what keeps going on in the rest of the storylines. It's a very exciting time, I'd say. Tanasi, great to have your company as always.
Praise be to Krishna.
Praise be to Krishna indeed. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.